One of the most important things we could do for our children is to let them know that they are loved. But how do we express our love in a way that they can understand? Hello and welcome to For Faith and Family with Dr. Richard Land. I'm Harold Harper, and I'll be sitting in for Dr. Land today as we visit with Dr. Gary Chapman. Gary's a well-known marriage and family counselor, and he's here today to share how we can speak the same love language as our children. Gary, welcome to For Faith and Family.
Well, thank you, Harold. It's great to be with you.
How have you been? It's been a while since we've had you on our program. Glad to have you back.
Well, I've been doing well. I've been busy doing marriage seminars around the country and seeing a lot of exciting things happen with couples, and that's always encouraging.
Now, the work that kind of puts your ministry on the map was the book that you produced, 5 Love Languages. Tell us just a little bit about that and what you think has been the reason that God has blessed that so much and why it has such a practical application to couples.
I think it's because the book addresses the deep need for emotional love. You know, God made us as creatures who have emotions, and our deepest emotional need is the need to feel loved. And that book helps couples and parents understand how to connect with their spouse or their children in meeting that emotional need for love. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, the emotional climate changes in the family.
Well, it's a tremendous book, and you have a tremendous ministry, and that's why I'm excited about having you on today, because I want to talk today about raising kids, and I want to primarily focus on children, but perhaps we'll touch on teenagers as well. In a culture that really threatens the family, we have so much of a need to really be on the top of raising our kids. What do you think makes it so difficult to raise children today?
I think there are many things. I think one is the time pressure. Mm-hmm. When many families, both the husband and the wife, are working outside the home, time is a premium. And the fact is, many parents don't have a whole lot of time with their children. So I think that's one factor. I think another factor is the culture presses so strongly on children today. Particularly those children that watch so much television. Mm-hmm. And the children are pulled in 1,000 directions, and typically it's not the direction the parents want them to be walking. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of that. Also, I think the fact that the family is separated so often, I mean by that the extended family. So many couples grow up where the children are not near grandparents, they're not near relatives, and they don't have that support system. And then, of course, the other factor is we have so many children who are growing up in single-parent homes, which is extremely difficult.
What would you say is the key to successful child rearing?
Well, that's a big question, Harold. I don't know if there's one key, but I do know that one of the most important things is the children feeling loved, and that's what I focus on in my book on the 5 love languages of children. I do believe that it's the most fundamental need the child has in terms of emotions, and when that need is met, when the child feels loved, then the rest of parenting becomes easier. When that need is not met, when the child has what I call an empty love tank, you're going to have a lot more anger in that child. You're going to have much more misbehavior in that child. So it has to be one of the keys to parenting is learning how to effectively love your children.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because most of our listeners, being in a Christian audience, would say, well, I totally love my child, and my child knows that I love them. But that's when you sit down with the child, sometimes that unconditional love is not really felt by the child. Can you explain that?
I think you're right. I think most parents would certainly say, I love my children, and they would think that their children feels loved. But the fact is there are thousands of children in Christian homes who do not feel loved by their parents. And a part of that is that the parent has never learned how to communicate love in a language the child will feel. And in reality, some of our love is conditional love. You know, we sometimes say to our children, I'll give you something if you will clean your room. And that's conditional love. That's not a gift. That's a bargain, that you've laid out for the kid.
We call it an incentive, Dr. Chapman.
Incentive, okay. The kid next door will do that for you. They'll clean the room if you'll give them something. So, love, however it's expressed in any of the 5 languages, has to be something freely given. It's not a reward for the child doing something for you. It's something that you're giving the child, and that's what love is. So I think many of us have a lot to learn about unconditional love.
How do you know whether you're communicating unconditional love or conditional love?
Well, I think unconditional love can be expressed in many ways. You know, when I give the 5 love languages, those are the 5 fundamental ways that we express love to a child. And there are many dialects within those 5 languages, but any of those can be unconditional and should be unconditional. You know, God's love for us is unconditional. He loves us no matter what, no matter how we behave. Now, we suffer when we do wrong, and certainly a child needs to suffer when they do wrong because there's discipline. But if the child feels loved, even the discipline is going to be received in a much more positive way. So it's really important that we learn how to communicate love on an emotional level so that the child feels loved.
You just mentioned the 5 love languages. Can you explain what those are?
Yes, and there's no particular order of these, but one of them is physical touch. You know, we've long known the emotional power of physical touch. Jesus was our example in that when he touched the children, you know, and blessed them. So physical touch is a powerful communicator of love to children, so long as it's affirming. But, you know, there's also abusive touch, and that obviously is not love. Words of affirmation, using words to affirm the child. We've also known that words are powerful. In fact, the book of Proverbs says life and death are in the power of the tongue. So what you say to a child is extremely important. Quality time is a 3rd love language, by which I mean you give the child your undivided attention, which means you have to go to the level of the child. If they're, 2 or 3 years old, you're on the floor and you're rolling the ball back and forth, and they have your undivided attention. As they get older, you have to change the focus, but it's giving the child your undivided attention. A 4th love language is gifts. It's universal to give gifts as an expression of love. And number 5 is acts of service, doing something for the child, cooking a meal, making their favorite cake, putting the bicycle chain back on the bicycle. So it's doing things for the child. So those are the 5 love languages. And the key, Harold, is that each child has a primary love language. One of those 5 is more important than the other 4. And parents have to learn to speak the child's primary love language and then sprinkle in the other 4.
That was one of the things that I had to learn when I read your book, The 5 Love Languages, is my love language might be acts of service, and I can do a lot of acts of service for Donna, but that may not be necessarily her love language. She may rather prefer her primary would be words of affirmation. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, in marriage, I think, again, that's why this concept has helped so many couples. By nature, we tend to speak our own language, just as you've noted. You know, a husband, let's say his language is physical touch. So he comes home in the afternoon, he wants to love his wife, he walks into the kitchen, he starts putting his arms around her, and she says, "Leave me alone, can't you see I'm busy?" You know, and he walks out feeling rejected. He was trying to love her. The problem is he was speaking his love language, not her love language. Her language might be acts of service, and if so, the greatest thing he could do is to walk in there and say to her, "Honey, why don't you sit down and rest and let me finish that?" Wow, she feels love because he's speaking her language. So that's the key in marriage, is learning the primary love language of your spouse and then choosing to speak it.
You've applied it to teenagers and you've applied it to children too. It's the same basic principle, right?
Yes, you know, the 3 books, one grew out of the other. I wrote the first book for couples, and then I wrote the book 5 Love Languages of Children for parents. And then parents were coming to me and saying, you know, we've been using that and it's been wonderful with our children, but now our child has become a teenager. And they asked me, does the love language change when they get to be teenagers? And my answer was no, I don't think so. But you have to learn new dialects of their primary language, because whatever you've been speaking as a child, they consider that childish, and they don't want that now. They want something different. So the love language is the same, but you have to learn new ways of expressing that love language when they get to be teenagers. So that's what gave rise to my book on the 5 love languages of teenagers.
Now, the other fundamental point throughout all 3 of those applications is the emotional tank, is what you explain through all 3 books and when you go around speaking across the country. Talk to us a little bit just about what you mean by the emotional tank.
Yeah, I got that concept from Dr. Ross Campbell, who's a psychiatrist, with whom I wrote the book, The 5 Love Languages of Children. He'd had 30 years' experience with children, and he uses the love tank concept, and I really, really liked it. The idea is that in every child, there's a emotional love tank, and if the tank is full, that is, the child genuinely feels loved by the parents, then the whole world looks bright. But if the love tank is empty and the child does not feel loved by the parents, the child will grow up with many internal struggles, and in the teenage years, the child will typically go looking for love in all the wrong places. Mm-hmm. So the key is to learn how to keep the love tank of the child full. You'll have less misbehavior, you'll have less anger, and in the teenage years, the child will be more likely to receive instruction from you if they feel loved by you.
Okay, let's stop here for a moment and camp out, because what you're saying is a real important principle that I don't want to gloss over. You're talking about the importance of a child feeling and depending on the love relationship between the parent and the child. Many parents think that everything's hunky-dory in home and that our child knows that we love them, yet that for whatever reason the child may not be feeling that love. Can you talk to us about the importance of how do we make sure that the love relationship between parents and children develops properly?
Well, I think the key is learning to speak the child's primary language. And in the book, I deal with several ways to discover a child's primary love language. For example, let me just share a couple. One is you observe the child. How does the child express love to other people? You know, if your child is always hugging on people, mm-hmm. you and everybody else, then physical touch is probably their love language. If they're always giving gifts to people, then gifts is probably their love language. So you observe their behavior. And then also you observe what they request of you most often. If they say, you know, Mommy, can we take a walk together? Or Daddy, will you play with me? They're asking for quality time. Mm-hmm. And if they ask for that a good bit, then that's probably their language, quality time. The other is, what do they complain about most often? Here's a child who says to a mother, you know, we don't ever take walks in the park since the baby came. Mm. You know, he's complaining. He used to get quality time, but now he doesn't get it. So what does the child complain about? So this is the first step, is for the parent to discover the child's primary love language. Then you want to speak that language regularly. And if you do, you can be assured the child will feel loved. And it doesn't mean you speak only that language. You want to give them the other 4 as well, because ideally we want the child to learn to receive love in all 5 languages and speak love in all 5 languages. But if you don't speak that primary language, the child's not going to feel loved.
For Faith and Family, we'll return in just a moment. But right now, I'd like to remind you about some of the exciting things available at faithandfamily.com. Hi, I'm Matt Hawkins, for Faith and Family's executive producer. The aim of faithandfamily.com is to be a place where you can get reliable, up-to-date information on the issues that are facing your faith and your family. That's why you'll find articles and commentaries on a variety of subjects, including abortion, gambling, and pornography. Don't forget, For Faith and Family is podcasting. By signing up for the For Faith and Family podcast, you can listen to our program on your own time. It's automatically downloaded to your computer, and you can listen to it anytime you like, as often as you like. For more information on podcasting and the free For Faith and Family podcast, just visit faithandfamily.com, click on the podcast icon. We'll return now for the conclusion of today's For Faith and Family.
Talk to the teachers today that are listening that have an application in the classroom. Perhaps they're not connecting with the child. This would apply even in a teaching setting, wouldn't you think?
Yes, Harold. In fact, that's been one of the encouraging things for Dr. Campbell and I, is that this book, The 5 Love Languages of Children, has not only been read by parents and grandparents, but a lot of public schools are actually using this book in teacher workshops. Because teachers understand that if a child comes to school with an empty love tank, that child is not going to learn very well. And obviously, teachers can't take the place of parents, but teachers can learn how to effectively meet a child's need for love. So if the teacher can learn the primary love language and speak it to that child, then the child is going to be more responsive to receiving instruction from that teacher. Mm-hmm. So it has a lot of application to the classroom.
The other night, we were talking around the kitchen table at dinner time about memories we had about grandparents, and it moved into a discussion that what memories have we created with our own children? And I just asked both of our children to talk about some of the things they would remember after we're gone. And Dr. Chapman, I must confess, I won't share exactly what they said on the air, but it was very convicting because it showed that we still have some work to do in communicating some love language to our children and communicating the unconditional love to our children. Can you talk about the importance of realizing that when you're raising your children, the importance of that, and how do you protect against maybe self-esteem issues or insecurity or damaging a child emotionally, even though you may not be aware of what you're communicating and how your messages affect your children?
Yeah, I think there's another whole aspect of this that you're alluding to there, and that is when you take a child's primary love language and you turn it in a negative way. For example, if their language is words of affirmation and what you give them are critical words, then you hurt that child more deeply than you would hurt another child with those same words. Or if physical touch is their language, and your main method of discipline is every time they do something wrong, you spank them. So you're giving them the most severe punishment you could give them when you spank them. Whereas another child, the spanking would not be that severe to them because that's not their language. So it's important for a parent to realize that, like if gifts is their language and you take away a gift as a means of punishment, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying that's severe punishment. I hope they committed a really big crime because you're giving them really big punishment. So we tend to think that whatever discipline method we're using is the same for all children, but it's not. Just like we tend to think that expressing love to a child will mean the same thing. If you have two children and you go on a business trip and you bring home both of them a teddy bear, one of them, it may mean, this is wow, they give the teddy bear a name, they put it in the room, they tell grandmother about it, and the other one takes the teddy bear and says, well, thanks, and they toss it on the couch, and they make nothing of it. And sometimes parents say, well, one is being thankful and grateful and the other is not. No, it's just that to one, their love language was gifts, and it was really a big deal. To the other, gifts is not their language, and they appreciate the teddy bear, but it's really not a big deal.
Let's talk about some of the love languages and unpack them each individually. First, let's talk about the importance of the appropriate physical touch. You mentioned in your book that studies indicate that many parents only touch their children when it's necessary, like when you're dressing them or undressing them, putting them in the car, maybe carrying them to the bed or perhaps even tucking them in at night. But that's about the limit of physical touch. Can you talk about the importance of that if that's their primary love language?
Yeah, I think the reason many parents would fall into that category is because physical touch is not their love language. Was not meaningful to them growing up, or they didn't maybe get a lot of it. They didn't learn how to speak the language growing up. You see, we either learn to speak these 5 languages growing up, or we don't learn to speak these 5 languages growing up. So if you were not in a touchy-feely family, then as an adult, it may not be very natural for you to initiate physical touch, even to your children. So you're touching them when they need to be touched, when they have to be touched. But physical touch is a fundamental language of love. And as an adult, I say, if it doesn't come natural for you, then this is a wonderful time to learn to speak this language so that you consciously think, I'm going to touch this child several times a day in a positive way. I'm going to kiss them. I'm going to hug them. I'm going to pat them on the back. I'm going to run my hand through their hair. I'm going to give them touches. Again, all the research indicates that children that are touched tenderly fare better emotionally than children that are not touched tenderly. And a lot of that research was done in European orphanages where children were left for hours not being touched. And children fare better if they're touched. So, we have to start where we are, but we have to learn how to give touch. I think another aspect of this, Errol, is that some fathers, because they've heard so much about sexual abuse and that sort of thing with children, when their daughter gets to be a teenager, they kind of draw back from touching her. They don't want to do the wrong thing, so they draw back. The fact is, that teenage daughter, if physical touch is her language, she needs that father's hugs and kisses and pats on the back. She needs that through adolescence. In fact, if she doesn't get it, she's far more likely to turn to an older teenager who will give it to her. So, physical touch is a really powerful language of love, and all children need physical touch. But if it's their primary language, it's extremely important to touch them.
Dr. Chapman, let's talk about words of affirmation. You know, we're in a performance-based society, and a lot is rewarded. I mean, you do well in work, and you're rewarded. You do well on a team, and you're rewarded. But some of that has transferred over. The world system of performance-based love, conditional love. Talk to us about the importance of words of affirmation.
Well, I think there are many dialects within this love language, and you're talking about different ones there. You know, words of affection, for example, focus on who the child is. You know, it's not what they look like, it's not what they perform, it's just who they are. You know, I love you because you're you. You know, I love you because you're my child. And you know, when the child is small, it's not even the words, it's the tone of voice. You know, when the child's a baby, they don't understand the words. You know, we look at them and we say, you sweet thing, you're the sweetest thing I've ever seen. You know, or we can say, you little rascal, you're just like your daddy. You know, yeah. And it really doesn't matter what you say when they're little. They don't understand the words. It's the tone of voice. But as they get older, the words become extremely important. So there's words of affection that focus on who the child is, but there's also words of praise, you know, for what they do. And that's okay, so long as you understand that you reward them for effort. You give them words for effort, not for perfection. And that's where a lot of parents get into trouble. You know, we do that well when they're little. Harold, when they're standing by the chair learning to walk, you know, and we get about 2 feet away and we say, come on, you can do it, walk, you can walk. And they take half a step and fall. Now, what do we say? We don't say, you dumb kid, can't you walk? You know, we say, yay! And they get up and try again.
Right.
We rewarded their effort. The problem is, as the child gets older, we stop rewarding effort and we start looking for perfection. So if they don't make the bed up the way we think they should have made the bed up, we give them negative words about what they did rather than positive. But if you give them affirming words for their effort, they're far more likely to be motivated to go back and try harder the next time. So you affirm them for effort, and then you give them instruction next time they start the project again on how to do it a little better. Also, there's words of encouragement. You know, encouragement means to instill courage. You're saying to the child, you know, that's close, that's good, you've almost got it. You know, and those kind of words encourage the child to keep working. I noticed the way you shared the clay with Mary in the class today. That's really great. You know, you're noticing their behavior, the behavior patterns that are positive, and you're affirming those verbally. So, you know, words are extremely powerful, and there's different kinds of words, but the words need to be designed for the benefit of the child, and to instill in the child, I love you no matter what. I think those words should always stand alone. It's not, I love you, will you do this for me?
Right. Or
I love you, but I'll tell you right now, you know, and we come down hard on them. Far better just to say, I love you. And if there's correction needed, then fine, you can correct them, but don't tie it to those words, I love you. Just let those words stand alone, because that's what the child needs to feel, is I'm loved no matter what. Yes, I can make my mother or my father unhappy. When I do wrong, they're unhappy, they're sad, and they're going to correct me, but they love me. And that's what you want the child to feel.
Anyone who works with children can benefit from learning how to communicate better with them and to love them individually. You know, in today's time-pressured world, it's so easy to get busy and we forget the impact that we have on our children. Well, in Gary's book, The 5 Love Languages of Children, he provides an excellent tool for parents and teachers to glean more ideas on how to express their love to children. If you would like to pick up a copy, be sure to visit our online bookstore at faithandfamily.com. While you're there, you can also get a copy of today's program or learn more about Gary's ministry. Once again, our website address is faithandfamily.com. For Faith and Family Radio is produced in Nashville, Tennessee by the Southern Baptist Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. For more information about our guest and past programs, please visit our website at faithandfamily.com. When you go there, you'll find Dr. Land's commentaries, your favorite broadcast, as well as a number of exciting resources for you and your family. We'd also love to hear what you think about today's program, so please be sure to drop us a note at forfaithandfamily.com. Our producer for today's broadcast is Amber Chesser. Our executive producer is Matt Hawkins. I'm Harold Harper, and I hope you'll join us again next time for Faith and Family with Dr. Richard Lamb.